All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to, I guess we're tentatively calling this the CheloniaCast, pending any further changes. But I kind of like the ring to it at this point. We're back. I'm Michael Skibsted. We've got. I got to see my layout over here. Up in the center of the screen, we've got the Ken from Georgia. We've got in the lower left Jack the Ripper, Jack Thompson, and in the lower right we've got the Ohio Herper, Jason Wills, and Turtle Aficionado. And so today is going to be a fun one. I think everyone immediately sort of knows who the guest is. He's definitely no mystery in the turtle world. I think the first thing that a lot of times I think about, at least when I think about this person, is the reptile or turtle personality of the year award. I think that's the case every year. I know whenever I'm on social media, Instagram, Facebook, every time I'm on there, pretty much I see something, whether it's from the man himself or from some robot Instagram that's making a repost or something. There's just always content out there from this person, and I feel like he's been on every major reptile podcast. Everybody knows who he is. He's got a huge personality and just an awesome guy. So without further ado, we want to welcome Vice President and Senior Director of the Turtle Room, Anthony Pierlioni. Anthony, thank you for coming on today and talking with us.
Well, thank you so much. I just want you guys to know, my wife and I on Turtly Devoted just did an episode on love languages, and my love language is words of what is words of encouragement. What kind words? I don't know how it's worded, pun intended, fittingly, but thank you for your kind words, because I'm over here gushing and in complete love with you after that. So you're going to have to deal with that. It's a pleasure. I just love turtles. It's the weirdest thing. I can't shake it. It just consumes my life. And, for you young guys, just kind of wondering what's next, just whatever it is, it's just, some of us don't grow out of it, and some of us don't, choose a life without them, I guess. So even if we could be on like opposite ends of the aisle, or have a different, like some people are into field work, some are into keeping, some are into education, some kind of dabble in all of it. But I think we're all kind of somewhere on that spectrum, and then other people kind of move away and come back. But for a lot of us, it doesn't go away ever. It's there, even if we're not like consumed by it and have it be a huge part of our lives. It never goes away. So this is your future.
And I think that's a great point in terms of it never goes away. But even now, it's not something that's really easy to find, sort of a community of like-minded individuals. I feel like it never is, and you really got to kind of reach out and figure out who else is into this kind of stuff. And that was really honestly the genesis for this podcast that we wanted to do, is honestly just an excuse to meet with cool people and to talk turtles, because we can't do it in the majority of our lives. I was kind of thinking about this. This might be kind of an interesting that everyone would have some level of experience with, but like we're all four of us are high school seniors at this point, so we kind of don't care much. But throughout in high school, at least, we've all had kind of different, like, I think, been interpreted in different ways. And I think it's always been kind of positive. A lot of people, like after TTPG, I had some people come up to me and they're like, yeah, that was a cool presentation, but you must be kind of the weird turtle kid and everything like that. But I'm just always curious, like, what was everyone's experience, sort of? And what's your experience, I guess? Are you and I don't think there's a wrong answer here, obviously, but the weird turtle kid, or just like that everyone knows you for something else, and that's kind of just the thing nobody knows about you? There's so many different ways that you kind of express that. For me, at least, it's kind of been, I've done sports and stuff, so I've been integrated in other areas of high school culture, and I'm definitely ready to be done with it. But at the same rate, it's not like a lot of people actually they know about the turtles, but don't know kind of to the extent that I'm interested. I don't know what the experience for everyone else was like or is like, I guess.
I mean, I could go first if you want.
There's no order. Just call them as you
Yeah.
see them.
Yeah.
Jay.
So, I mean, throughout high school, like I'm always known as like the turtle guy. Like everybody knows me for that. Like, and but I also played football and I wrestled for 3 years. And I wrestled for 1 year, but I played football pretty much all of high school. And yeah, I was an offensive lineman because I'm a pretty big guy. And I mean, it was like two different things I'm known for. Like I'm integrated with all the people and kind of in the general social structure of high school, but I also have this immense interest in turtles that they all know about because I mean, a lot of people from my school follow my Instagram, like they know what I do and they see what I post on my stories and all the things that I do. So they all call me the Turtle Man. People like stop me in the hallway and say things to me, and teachers will say things to me. They think it's really cool. Like it trickles down to everything.
Yeah, I am fortunate enough to say that.
That's awesome.
This, at least, it sounds like all of us are at least, being perceived positively by most people. It's certainly also true that reptiles have a lot of stigma, and some people will look at you differently if you like snakes or turtles. They think that, they're kind of cold-blooded, cold-hearted animals, but we just know that's not true. So yeah, at my school, I'm also known to be more of a snake guy, and that's cool with me. It doesn't seem to affect me at all. Yeah. What about you, Jason?
Well, I'm in college right now pursuing an undergraduate degree in the sciences. So in high school, I played sports and I kept turtles, but it wasn't really until I guess my senior year when I started thinking about what I was going to do afterwards. And I guess that's where I'm at. I'm double majoring in biology and anthropology, and I keep turtles and I like looking for them outside. So I guess a similar story to most, but yeah, nothing too crazy.
I love it. I can relate to that, and I think at your age, collectively, I think for a lot of people, you get kind of caught up in other things. You worry a lot, and I'm not saying you guys, but I'm saying at your age, you worry about what other people are thinking, and there's some level of wanting to be cool, whatever that means. And I like many of you mentioned, I was into sports, and I played basketball, and I ended up going to play basketball in college, and played a little bit in Italy after that, which was really cool. And I always had the turtles in my mind, and I always kept them. I had alligator snapping turtles in my dorm room that I wasn't supposed to have. And then the RA would say hey, I heard you have some turtles. I'm like, yeah, let's just keep that between us. And would, kind of, I'm a very nice guy, but when it came to my turtles, I would have gotten kicked out of the dorm if I needed to by ignoring their, requests and everything. And generally was a good person, so they left me alone. And then maybe was kind of intimidating to them too, because I'm like, as Jack mentioned, I'm also a huge person. So when we were creating the Turtle Room, and when I was figuring out what I wanted to be when I grew up and what I wanted to do with my life, and really feeling a little bit depressed because I wasn't smart enough to go to school and study the sciences as you guys, many of you guys will do, and as Jason is already doing. I felt bad about it, I'm not a biologist. I don't have a degree in zoology, but I care about turtles and I want to make a difference. So what can I do? And that's how the Turtle Room was built.
It's a really good point, and I think organizations like the Turtle Room fill really an important and integral sort of space. in terms of kind of bridging the captive husbandry and private side of keeping animals with even the more like the zoo and the institutional side, but also I think there is kind of a third sphere there in terms of and zoos are connected with this, but also bringing kind of researchers into the mix, and you have sort of this dialogue between all of these different parties that wouldn't necessarily be communicating with each other, and I think you make progress in maybe 3 times as fast in terms of and maybe sometimes it hinders some things, but I think it's a integral niche that is filled. Yeah, I mean, if the Turtle Room, I guess just as a personal anecdote, I've been into turtles for a decade now, which seems like a long time for me. But a long time ago, I think it was maybe 4th grade, I was into it, and I was homesick. I started Googling YouTube. It was like some of the first time I was on there, and immediately found the Turtle Room content. And that was some of the first exposure I had. And I just thought, this is the coolest stuff. And so in terms of educational outreach, I mean, that's another thing the Turtle Room just hits on that no one else, I think, really comes close a lot of the time. So just filling those 2 gaps is just incredible.
I appreciate that a lot.
Yeah. I mean, in terms of...
I didn't realize that. That's really cool.
Yeah, and I think I'm sure I speak the same for a lot of the other guys on the show in terms of like early exposure to that.
I saw those videos a long time ago. Those and Chris Leone's and all those other videos I've seen.
You're talking about me then, right?
Yeah.
I made the videos back in the day, which is... They're so bad, but that's okay. And I can remember thinking, and I have the same thought with the podcast, where like it's not about production value. Now, when you look at the turtle YouTubers now, even Chris Leone and Greg and Kenan, who's been there all along, but the production value, I could remember seeing Kenan stuff and saying, and this isn't meant as a shot at him at all, but when I was making stuff and he was making stuff and saying, okay, well, like I could never create stuff that has his production value. So like, then where's my niche that I fit into? And that's kind of the thought with the nonprofit as well too. And people will tell me all the time, there's a lot of hobbyists who are like, oh, well, I'm going to start my nonprofit because then I can get donations to take care of the rescues, and I can get donations to feed, the rare animals I have and everything else. And like kind of challenging some folks like, okay, what are you doing that's different? And why should somebody give money towards it? And I think it's still something that we're trying to answer and highlight appropriately with the Turtle Room. I mean, in terms of communicating that to the public. I shouldn't say answer. Like I think we have a really great mission statement and vision statement and all of that. But with those videos, I think they were an important part of our growth. And it was like, you know what? Like, and I said the same thing to Chris when he was getting started with YouTube. I was kind of pushing him to get back into it a couple years ago, and now his stuff is starting to take off. But like, go out there. Don't worry about production value. You don't have to make a 30-minute video every time you put something out. Like, even if it's just, and this is how I feel about podcasts as well, even if it's just like you get a chance to be a fly on the wall. Like the 5 of us right now are driving to Hamburg, or we're driving to go out field herping, or we're driving to TTPG or the TSA conference or something, and we're having a conversation in the car. What does that conversation look like? And giving people an opportunity to be a fly on the wall, like I think that's perfect. And the production value for me, something that I just don't really care about. Like the value is in the conversation and the expertise and ideas that the group have that they're carrying around with them, if that makes sense. That was really long-winded and ridiculous.
No, but I think that's 100% true in terms of, I mean, I didn't focus on the quality, really, the videos. I'm a turtle nerd, and that's what I wanted to see. I think that one of the first ones that just stands out in my mind is I think it was the male Depressa, I forgot if it's an Arachon or a Spinosa. I think it's
that big one.
Yeah.
I remember that.
Yeah.
I saw that a while ago.
Is that a
Sorry,
Spinoza or a Depressa? I think Spinoza, right? Male?
Spinoza.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, the largest spiny hill turtle on record for it's like 12 inches or something, but that was one of the first ones.
Yep.
I think I
legit
remember.
12 full inches.
Yeah, it's a tank of an animal. That's one of the first things I remember seeing on there, and I don't want to be blunt, but the production quality is definitely not a Canon video, but I really didn't care. I mean, it was one of the most interesting videos I think on YouTube in terms of turtle content. So, and it's like 3 minutes. I think that there's something to be said for kind of short, succinct videos in terms of.
Yeah.
But yeah, no,
I agree. I completely agree. I've always felt that way.
Yeah, and that kind of content is, I think it reaches. I think we should take a step back before we start to talk about TTR stuff, and kind of just, I think, ask the generic question. We got to kick things off with just sort of why turtles. I think it's an abused question, but at the same rate, everyone's got a slightly different story. So just why turtles, Anthony? I guess.
Man, why not turtles? Right? I think, like, for me, it was there's like some childhood trauma and interesting experiences. I don't know if you could hear the rap music outside. My wife and kids just got home, so they're just rocking out to probably like the, I don't know, Troll soundtrack or something like that. So I started catching I grew up like very poor and with some not so great role models and adults in my life. And my aunt, who was a wonderful person, like a second mother to me, would take me to catch painted turtles, Eastern painted turtles, in like this man-made pond, beautiful pond that was like between like 4 condo complexes where she and my grandmother lived. And she was like my second mother because I was there all the time. She was younger, in her early 20s, and she would just like babysit me. And we would go catch turtles. To me, I thought it was normal, like going fishing or, something that people do. I didn't know how rare and ridiculous it was to go and catch turtles, but we would do it all the time, like a fishing net duct taped to a wiffle ball bat. And we would go out and catch turtles, and I would take them back and I would keep them, in small, 10-gallon aquariums with colorful gravel. I think at one point I even had one in a large salad bowl with gravel. Absolute ridiculous what we did with that. But it was something that was really important to me. And that being around that pond, hearing the birds, hearing the bugs, smelling the swampy areas, and like seeing the little turtles poking their heads up, like to see if you're still there looking at them. All of that was something that like reminded me of like a safe place and a happy place. So I kept that with me throughout my entire life. And she passed away in a car crash. She got in a car crash with my mother when I was 9. And I don't know, for me, it was always like back to like that wonderful feeling of like my aunt is here, we're out there. I would go with my father once in a while too. He was like my best friend. And I would, just kind of remember those good times, if that makes any sense. So all throughout middle school, high school, catching turtles, keeping turtles. Like I said, I would read the books all the time when I was a kid, like field guides and stuff like that. So I knew what alligator snappers were, but I really didn't understand how everything fit together. And certainly didn't have good role models in my life or anything like that knew what the heck was going on. So I would catch a common snapping turtle and think it was an alligator snapping turtle, in Connecticut, because it looked different than the other one. I had no idea what I was really doing. And then in college, early on, I had a girlfriend who wanted a pet turtle, and I'm like, oh, I know all about turtles. Let's do this. And I got her some turtles from a pet store that she kept in her dorm, and it was like, oh man, this is awesome. At that time I hadn't had turtles for like 2 years, and it was like, wow, this is so great. 2 years at that age is a long time, right? Like that space. So I ended up, when I'm going to this pet store, talking to the pet store owner and learning a lot from him. He calls me now when he has a turtle question, but at that time I would just sit there and ask him a million different questions. anything that I could come up with about turtles. And found myself talking to him a lot about alligator snapping turtles, and he would say like, "Oh, I can definitely get you like a hatchling alligator snapping turtle," and then that's how I ended up with them, you know, in my dorm room and everything. And that's what really changed everything for me, because then I started to research turtles online and things like that, and was able to kind of connect with other people and learn that there's this whole big network out there that I never knew about. I'm sorry, my family's so loud and obnoxious. And that was it was the combination of those snapping turtles that I wanted to start researching, and the explosion of the internet and the possibilities that offered. And then, you know, at that point, that's when I started to really feel bad about myself, that I was already pot committed and had been going to school now for a year, 2 years, and paying to be an art teacher is what I was going to school for. And I felt really bad about it. I ended up changing my major and getting out earlier, but it was, you know, I was too far down the arts direction to switch to science at that point. But and that's what led into the turtle room, because as it continued to grow and I acquired more turtles and had more of an interest in just doing more and helping however I could, I knew that I had wonderful people skills, was college educated, I could write, I could speak. Like, there's got to be some way I could help out, and that's what led into the turtle room. So that's me in, I guess that's an intro into me anyway.
That's cool to hear. Sort of, I guess turtles are sort of a positive escape, right? And that's something that I feel like I can relate to that at a different level, more so on the I'm fortunate that my family is super supportive and everything, but like in terms of schoolwork and everything, it's certainly a retreat and just something positive I can go to. I was wondering how you got the alligator snapping turtles that are mentioned in. I was reading your bio on the TCR page, and I was curious about that. But that makes sense, and I guess back in the day there were probably fewer regulations on. I don't know what it's like up by you now, but I imagine you'd have to maybe some state legislature on keeping alligator snappers or.
Connecticut's weird. Connecticut is like outlaw everything, enforce nothing. Not to say I'm doing things I shouldn't. At this point, all I have is one alligator snapper that I use. It's a mid-size, I guess. She's probably like 14 inches, female, and I use her for education, which is great, because my wife and I do a lot of educational talks, and obviously it definitely works well for the kids. But Connecticut has like a law about importing turtles, but it basically, you know, relates mostly to like bringing in large amounts to be sold. And then we have like a red-eared slider ban now that's newer, that came to us in 2018. And then beyond that, really most of the laws are just, you can't sell under 4 inches and you can't collect anything from the wild. And then most of our species are protected. So that's how someone becomes someone who specializes in Asian turtles, for instance, because they just outlaw everything. It's not like Maryland or New Jersey where you can keep, you know, with permits. They say there's a permit process in Connecticut, but there's not really opportunity for people to get permits and stay on the right side of things. So, you know, I just don't get involved with any native stuff in Connecticut, but I'll drive to Pennsylvania, New Jersey to help out with in situ work for our native species. So it just depends on where you are.
That's actually that's kind of relatable to me, because I mean, I live in Delaware, and like nobody ever hears anything about Delaware. It's like it's like a completely out of the way, like not a very relevant state. But it's not really that there is kind of a process to get permits here, but it's not as easy as Maryland or Pennsylvania, and the state here is a lot smaller, so it's like everybody kind of knows each other, and like in the system too. Like I know the state vet, I know I pretty much know everybody in the state, and they all like and support me and everything. But it's also like I don't know, it'll be difficult to try and keep some species or some things you just can't breed or have more than a certain amount of, and yeah. But what I did to kind of get around some of that is,
I think it's good just to talk to people. Sorry, I'll be quiet. I have a delay, so you guys are hearing me
No,
afterwards
I
every
agree,
time it's messing
100%.
everything up.
Like,
Go ahead.
no, you're good. I do. That's actually exactly what I do. I have an exhibitor permit, which you can get in this state. It's essentially the easiest permit to get that allows you to keep a lot of foreign, like exotic animals, and it also lets you keep a lot of native animals too. There's some you can't keep, but that's how it pretty much covers all the animals I have, as long as they're like listed on the permit and I have to add them to it. And I use them because the permit is essentially like, this gives you the, like, you are legally allowed to use these in educational shows, and that's what I do. Like, that's how I make money sometimes. I've done them at nature centers. Like, they'll hire me, like, I'll do 4 or 5 shows at a certain nature center over like 2 months, and I get paid like $200 for each one. Like, it's really, and it's perfect because I get paid to go up there and talk about turtles and animals for an hour and to just share it with people. So it's like getting paid to do exactly what I like to do. So that's, yeah, it took me a couple of years to kind of get that put together, but now that I kind of have an idea of how to do it, like, I know how to structure it based on my crowd. Like, if I'm talking to like a bunch of small kids, then I know how to handle that different. It's different than if it's adults, but yeah, that's pretty much what I do here.
Joe Biden was around for was going to be around for one of these, right?
Joe Biden? I think he actually was at this point, because no, he literally lives like 2 minutes from me. Because he was going to be at one of the nature centers. But this was a while ago. I don't know about now, but I've seen him around the town before, and I mean, my mom used to know his son that died, not the one that's alive. But he has a very deep roots and connection to this town, so everybody where I am knows him, because this is like southern Delaware. But
That'd be pretty fun to talk to the president about
Super cool.
conservation and turtles, just to get that message out there. But
yeah, that would be pretty cool.
yeah, that's cool. It's cool stuff that you do, Jack. That's certainly something like here in Southern California. I barely know all the people on my street. It's kind of like, it's definitely a different kind of vibe here, which I guess for better or worse. I just think it's generally worse. But trying to reach people, I think, there's challenges in different ways. But I just haven't really been able to kind of keep as many animals, so that's a cool aspect. But in terms of animal keeping, I think there's it's no shock that Anthony has more species than anyone else here. How many currently?
So far. So I have exactly 250 animals, which is not that much when you compare to other people who do a lot of this. I know a normal person hears this and like, oh my gosh, this guy's such an animal hoarder. But I think in terms of different taxa, it's probably around 42 different species and subspecies. There's a couple color morphs mixed in as well, but I don't normally do that. But like I happen to have Vietnamese pond turtles that are a color morph as well. So like I'm going to keep those around. They fit into the project. It looks like it might actually be a dominant gene as well, so they could just like live within the group, and they're pure Anamantis, which is really cool. So we'll see how that goes. I just wrote an article on that for Radiata, the German journal. I like writing.
Oh, that's cool. I'm supposed to write something for them, but I don't know when I'm gonna get to that ever, because it's just like it's kind of tough to sit down and I've got like a list of other things that come in.
It really is.
Yeah, but yeah, that's something really interesting in terms of like what you specialize in. I feel like you've had an kind of experience working with so many different kind of genera and taxa even. Or even species, subspecies. I am curious though. I mean, not that we really like to pick favorites, but and for me, favorite turtles, not really to keep. I don't keep much, but just in general, kind of fluctuates. But I'm curious, like right now, what's your like favorite species to work with and why? I'm always curious of like what everyone's kind of what they're really looking forward to and.
It changes like constantly. I've grown into this person who just, the variety matters to me a lot. I think other people can really easily answer the question like, if you had to pick one and everything else had to go, and you were only allowed by law to like focus on one species or something, so then cross-contamination wasn't an issue or whatever, or as much of an issue. I don't know how I would answer that question. I think a lot of people know me for Spangler Eye because of the book that I wrote, the Vietnamese black-breasted leaf turtle. But like this year, I hatched Japonica for the first time. Now my partner, you say, well, how'd you write a book on the genus then? Well, my partner, our partner, Ben, has been producing them for many years. And he helped me basically write that piece of the book. But I produced them for the first time this year, which was a really big, like I was screaming, like my daughter didn't know what the heck was going on. But when I saw that first egg hatch, I was like, I just lost it. There's nothing better to me than watching a turtle hatch out of an egg. So I think the Geoemida genus is up there. I have some fertile spider tortoise eggs that I'm scared as we speak that I'm killing, but they're like, 9/10 of the way through incubation, and I'm trying not to candle them every day, and I'm second guessing everything I've done, even though they're right there. That's one that will mean a lot to me, because when I started with working with Steve and with the Turtle Room and trying to figure out what I wanted to be when I grew up in terms of a turtle person, I really wanted to work on projects that had some sort of at least preservation value. I won't say conservation, because I think that word gets thrown around a lot with captive situations when it shouldn't be. And so my spider tortoises are from the Knoxville Zoo. They're in the AZA Species Survival Program. And I've raised them from hatchlings, and now they're starting to produce. And like I said, this is the second year with fertile eggs, and I have not hatched one yet. So like that right now is something that I'm like geeking out over. And then also this year I hatched one of your favorites, Michael, the northwestern pond turtle, Actinemes marmorata, which is a really special one to me, because those animals came from a friend of mine who, like on the turtle forums and stuff like that, we used to geek out a lot over them. And he passed away, and on his deathbed, his final request for his animals that meant so much to him, to his wife, were, you need to get in touch with Anthony. And like, to me, that obviously means the world, like that somebody would trust me with something like that. And I didn't even get a chance to talk to him. He was very sick, told his wife that, and then he passed away. And then the turtles came to me. So, and I produced them for the first time this year, and just watching those little hatchlings grow up now is something that I'm really enjoying. So, like I said, multifaceted. I can't answer that question with just one species.
That's the pond turtle story is incredible. I didn't realize that. That's really an honor. Yeah, that's awesome that you actually. I mean, that you've produced so much, but also that your mentality is, I'm going to go out and tackle these I don't want to deal with the mass production and everything. I'm going to tackle these harder projects for, like you said, preservation value. And I am curious, I sort of have my thoughts about this, but like, what is your sort of distinction between preservation and conservation? I feel like that's something that's important for people to understand, that there is definitely a difference.
That's a wonderful question. In my mind, preservation helps a species in many ways. Not usually as effectively as conservation, but true conservation is a rare thing. It involves people from all sides of the aisle coming together and working together, and it's just something that happens rarely. I think that's something that can cause a little bit of cynicism in biologists, field biologists, and things like that, because they know how difficult it is to really conserve a species. And like, the true conservation in my mind for a species is like, I'm going to buy these 200 acres where these rare species live, and I'm going to make sure nobody does anything with it, or develops it, or comes in and poaches on that land or whatever. Like, that to me is true conservation. But that C word gets thrown around a lot for private hobbyists and keepers who want to act like what they're doing is more than what it probably is. And I was guilty of that when I was starting out as well. And that's kind of where it started with like the spider tortoise group, like, oh, this is awesome. But you have to actually consider, and this is the distinction, to answer your question in a long-winded way, because that's how I roll, is are those animals actually going back to the wild? If I produce those spider tortoises, are they going back to Madagascar? And is Madagascar ready? And will those spider tortoises stand a chance when they get there? And what are the risks that they're not going to bring disease in because now they've been hatched and raised in a place that has species from all over the world, including wild caught animals? Like, be real with yourself, you know, like that's the first step for us to actually be successful, is to stop using our own desires, hopes, dreams, all of that as fuel for like coming into this with like an angle where we're acting like something is actually something that's not. And you know, people will say like, well, PETA's horrible, and I agree. I'm an animal keeper. Like I don't want PETA to become the most powerful thing in the world, but their voice is important, and in that they're being fueled by something, and we need to understand what it is enough so that we have it and all other opinions in mind when we're trying to move forward. We can't just, you know, turn a blind eye to it. Before we came on, we were talking about the Egyptian tortoise, which has been proposed to be added to the endangered species list in America. Obviously, this is a species from Egypt and Libya, and it's not something that needs to be protected here the way the alligator snapping turtle does, which is also proposed to be added to the endangered species list, right? I oppose the listing of the Egyptian tortoise because they're not being imported anymore. They're not being poached to be smuggled to the US. And there are international laws in place to keep them from being smuggled to the US or sent to the US, right? It's not happening anyway. So the groups that want to list the tortoise have lots to gain as having that as a notch in their belt or a feather in their cap to say, we got this really critically endangered, about to be extinct tortoise on the American endangered species list. That's awesome. When really, when you look at it, that's a species that doesn't really need to be imported anymore because 503 hatchlings were produced over the last 3 years by private folks. And their thought in doing so, and their argument would be, well, the AZA is producing a lot of them. And that's not actually the case. The AZA has produced, like, you could count on one or two hands how many they produced in the last 3 years. So does that mean that the private sector is the answer? No, because the private sector, 95% of the time, is all about money and that sort of thing. And I'll just say, like, I don't think everyone has to be this way, but for me, I love turtles. I don't do it for the money. The only time I ever want money for a turtle I produce is because the person who has the turtle I want wants money, and it becomes a three-way trade situation where I'm like, yes, here's the turtle, send the money over to this person, and I'm going to take their turtle. I have a job that I love, that pays the bills, thankfully, and I don't need to breed animals for that. So that's why I worry so much about the preservation opportunities around breeding a certain species, as opposed to going for the popular species that people want to buy at the moment.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I think most of us are sort of united by a common. We want to ultimately see these animals doing well in their natural environments, sort of in situ, and it's an important distinction to make. Yep. That ex situ work is sort of the reserves. It's not really doing anything on the front line. The front line is more so, like you said, land acquisition. It's and you know, as an ecologist and biologist, I think that we have to realize that, I mean, preserving turtles is obviously very and beneficial, and we can make an argument for that, but turtles are also just part of a much larger web of biodiversity, and by preserving them, we're kind of helping keep that system intact, but at the same rate, we really need to tackle the entire habitats, but it's also, we need these reserves sort of in the case that the current kind of state of things continues at a trajectory. And species like, I mean, there's so many species that there's so little. I mean, the Kawara, the Asian box turtles, is a perfect example where a lot of those, they're probably more in captivity than in the wild at this point, and the land area that they occur in is probably smaller than a lot of residential neighborhoods, and it's just one little kind of ecological shift there. You could lose the entire wild population, and so kind of then you got to deal with readjusting to that. But just to have these reserves is preserving the species, but it's not, like you said, it's not conserving it. I think the distinction is conservation is applied in situ, whereas preservation is sort of keeping things in existence in the human sphere, I think, and having them mobilized in case of emergency. And people don't realize too, though, like, these things are a lot more complex than just breeding turtles and then, oh, we've lost a chunk of habitat, we can just go release them. I mean, actual conservation takes, like you said, it takes really, I think it takes an army, honestly, to move sort of the mountains that occur there. And with a lot of that legislation, it's more of a political agenda. The Diamondback Terrapins is a great example of that, too. I like the Egyptian tortoises. I mean, the Diamondback Terrapins is a state Florida legislature trying to ban any sort of people from owning them, but that's kind of it's counterproductive, I think, because that just kind of forces more people to go and poach. So you sort of are working against a political agenda, I think, a lot of the time, and there's no reason that private and I guess more like zoos, aquarium, AZA individuals can't really collaborate, because I think we are kind of fighting the same battle ultimately, and just maybe separated kind of by institutional boundaries. But yeah, those are some interesting points, and it's interesting to hear someone kind of talk about, I think one of the things that a lot of people don't necessarily realize when they're getting into this is the fact that legislation is not perfect, and that a lot of times it's motivated by other things. If someone can get this check on a box to get something kind of in their name, or some sort of influence, and then they get kind of a payoff for it. But I am curious, kind of, I guess, changing the subject a bit, but you mentioned it, the proposed listing of the alligator snappers on the ESA. I'm curious what you think about that, and kind of what everyone thinks about that. I'm sort of I feel like there's sort of poaching pressure in general, and in listing them maybe could bring a lot more federal funding to the species, but also I am sort of hesitant to accept any of these kind of things just because of the stuff that's written in between the lines.
Yeah. Okay, I was muted. No, I'm not. I apologize for my kids screaming in the background. I'm trying to mute myself when I'm not talking.
Well,
So sorry. I'm making it awkward because of the delay. Okay.
No, it's fine. We've got
there's three groups being listed because of with the new legislation, right? So you have the alligator snapping turtle, which I mentioned, the Egyptian tortoise, and now we're talking about map turtle species as well. And each one of them can give you a different example of kind of what can go right or partially right or like really wrong with this sort of legislation that's being proposed. So if you take the three of them, I mostly, the one that makes the most sense to me and that I am on board with is the alligator snapping turtle listing. I am sorry for those people who for years have been producing alligator snapping turtles and shipping them overseas and making a living that way. That really stinks. But personally, I chose not to make a living by selling turtles because I knew that this could be the future. And like I said, I breed animals for fun. I think you look on both sides, pros and cons, the effect that this could have for wild populations and giving law enforcement more tact so that they could actually drop the hammer on somebody a little bit more easily when they're caught doing something wrong. I say list the alligator snapping turtle. We, bred different mixes, different pairings of alligator snapping turtles together before we knew what was happening genetically with them and the fact that there were actually multiple species out there. So, we kind of screwed the pooch in that way anyway, as far as from a preservation standpoint. And I think that it's appropriate. I hate seeing anything get listed from a keeper standpoint, but like that one makes sense. I'm not going to argue it because I'm not a hypocrite. And I'm not going to be one of those people that looks at something through their own lens and not from the lens that makes the most sense for everybody, right? I'm going to be the person who wants to play nice with everybody on all sides of the aisle. You know how I feel about the Egyptian tortoise. I don't think exotic species should be listed. Non-native, non-U.S. species should be listed on the U.S. endangered species list. That's what CITES is for. The international legislation. And then the last one, the map turtles, the issue there is that they want to list 4 different map turtle species because they look alike. So they're basically admitting the inadequacies of their law enforcement, and that we're just going to list all 4 because we want to list this one, and that'll be kind of how the law works. That I have a problem with. I don't think that ignorance on the part of the people making the laws should be a reason for listing multiple species when you have 1 or 2 that you're actually looking at listing, if that makes sense. So that's my thoughts on those 3.
Yeah, Anthony, that really makes sense. I'm really surprised to hear about the Egyptian tortoises. That just sounds completely absurd to me. I have just one more specific question. First of all, just for listeners, currently there are 2 recognized official species of alligator snapping turtles. Personally, I believe in 3. So I'm just going to ask Anthony, if you said you would favor the listing of alligator snapping turtles as endangered. So I want to ask is that all 3 lineages or just 2 of them? Personally, I feel like Suwaniensis is probably more vulnerable than the other lineages. What do you think
I
about
don't mean
that?
to interject, but I do think that I do really strongly support the listing of the alligator snapping turtles, because if we need to give more the government needs. All right, now, I don't normally agree with this from all points, but I think they need more power to protect them, because even in protected areas, alligator snapping turtles are still exported a lot. They're highly valued in China, especially huge males, and now that it's becoming more common knowledge that there's distinct lineages, and even each lineage has different traits than the others, and like what you said with the Swaniensis, it has a very limited range. It's only in one drainage, and it's probably the most physically distinct one compared to your typical westerns. They tend to be the most consistently golden colored, and there's a lot of other differences too, but that drives the trade. And I've seen Swaniensis appear in Asian markets where there's no way you can get them legally, but and then of course the westerns and some of the ones in Georgia. The Apalachicolas aren't considered right now to be a distinct lineage, but I'm in support that they are, and they just need to be. There needs to be more attention on them being like poached, or even where it's legal to export them, because they're pretty fragile when it comes to comparing them to like sliders. They can't handle the same kind of exploitation because they have like a low population density, and it takes a long time for one of them to become a mature adult, and you remove a single adult male from a river system, that will have a cascade effect on it. And I'm pretty in support of alligator snapping turtle being listed. But
I think a point that too needs to be made is in terms of the species delimitation of Megacephalys is far from perfect. I think in future work, the Thomas paper in 2014 that originally split the 3 species, I think genetically was pretty limited. They used 2.5 mitochondrial markers, which in terms of they're essentially just sort of one inherited. They don't recombine, and they're kind of just one aspect of an organism's evolution. And I think we're missing a lot of information without any nuclear markers genetically and morphologically. Obviously, there's a certain level of when you get more characters that are distinct, you can make an inference that is kind of paralleled in terms of evolutionary history, but it's definitely not always the case. homoplasy, convergent evolution are certainly issues that are sort of being resolved, but at the same rate, we see that kind of thing occurring in genetics as well. So really, I think there needs to be, and the money is the thing behind this, and I think in 10 years or 5 years it won't be the case, but it's just too expensive to really get a large data set of multiple different types of markers to get a kind of holistic analysis. And I think that the point of captive keepers have sort of messed things up. It could, to some extent, even now be the case, because I think that there will be more kind of cryptic diversity revealed through larger data analyses that are forthcoming. At what level specifically? I mean, when do you draw the line between species and just sort of population substructuring? That's kind of hard, and there's not really a consensus for that, but to some extent I think we'll always be sort of messing up genetics unless everything is strictly defined within a population. But I think at present with the current species, that's kind of what we're dealing with. So the question is sort of just with the currently defined species, should there be a difference? And I guess I personally think that all of them have suffered enough to the point where it's sort of all of them kind of warrant that status. But I don't know how you feel, Anthony or Jason. Or
I think one more. I'm just going to say this quick. Is we should at least try to get some captive stocks of each different lineage before we can no longer do that, because that was not done with Galapagos tortoises, which is one of my favorite animals of all time. And it just pains me to see that like the whole scope of like morphological variation is not represented at all in captivity with Galapagos tortoises. They're almost all of the exact same type. There's over a dozen different I guess you could say, I mean, some consider them species, but varieties that are morphologically distinct in some sense and even genetically distinct. And even there's a lot of ongoing research with that. But that was when they could have been imported, it wasn't really taken advantage of. And by the time it just got to the point where they couldn't take any more because their population was so low. But I just wish that at least some of the ones they had in like the 20s and 30s were at least bred more, because now there's no saddlebacks in captivity anywhere, or there's barely any, essentially none. And we only really have the Santa Cruz giant tortoises and a couple like scattered individuals of other forms, but most of the forms are not represented at all. So I don't want to see that happen to the alligator snapping turtle, like, because it kind of ties back into that whole preservation aspect. It's like it's simpler than, it's like a simpler form of conservation. It's like worst comes to worst, we still have all of these captive animals. Say something happens to the wild ones, we have them. The species is not lost. And but if you're looking at the Galapagos tortoises now, they're pretty much all in the islands. Like that's where all of the captive stocks are. They're in the breeding centers on the exact same island. There's not really any left anywhere else in the world. And with alligator snapping turtles, I'd like to at least see groups or captive like keeping and breeding of like the Swanee forms and the Apalachicolas and ones that we with known origin, and just a better look at that. Like that's kind of before they're protected.
Yeah, I have a thought. It's going to be a delay now, so hopefully you got it. Okay. Here we go. Ken, the answer to your question from my perspective is you list the genus, and hopefully we don't end up with two genera, of alligator snapping turtles. I would think that the splits would be on the specific and subspecific level, and let's just go with that, right? Like just list them. They all, I think as Jack and Michael both pointed out, like they all are deserving at this point. We had our chance. In terms of Jack, your point about the Galapagos tortoise, I agree wholeheartedly. I think we haven't even scratched the surface in terms of figuring out the damage that has done in terms of muddying gene pools for several different turtles. And I'll use an example that I know well, because we all have our focuses. The Vietnamese black-breasted leaf turtle, Geoamitis spangleri, is something I remember speaking to Rick Hefner, who used to be the stud book coordinator and species survival plan keeper for the AZA. He was at the Denver Zoo at the time, and I spoke to him a lot about this. Like, why is the stud book, why is the SSP not keeping track of different localities if we know them? Like, for instance, Hainan Island Spangler Eye is very easy to distinguish from others, even though people have imported them and sold them as normal Spangler Eye because they're dummies, from my perspective. And by imported, I mean smuggled and poached and smuggled. So some of those have come in over the past few years, and people have like sent me pictures like, hey, someone wants to sell me these Spangler Eye. Like, what do you think? Like, buy them or I will. And now Daniel Gaillard is doing some, and others are leading efforts to do genetic testing on captive Spangler Eye. And we're actually starting to get some of the results back to see which ones are related to each other. The wild caught founders, that, you know, the holdovers from the large scale importation days before the turn of the century, very, very early 2000s and the late 90s, that sort of thing, when they were coming in really huge numbers. And we're starting to see like, hey, my friend here in Connecticut who also breeds Spangler Eye, like, we have some animals that match up. We're going to be working together to pair those animals up and to create actual known locality groupings based on the mitochondrial DNA, which is just a thrill like I can't even tell you. It's so wonderful. That's probably warranted across so many different species. And then you start to think, okay, what about the species that are totally extirpated from whatever area? Like, you talk about reintroduction, like, do the real true genetics even matter anymore if you're going to, like, you know, bring a tortoise back to an island where they've been completely removed and there's none left? Like, well, this island had a saddleback tortoise, or this island had, you know, an Aldabra-like tortoise. Like, let's, you know, bring those back there. And that's where you get into kind of the some of the weeds, some of the confusion and morality questions around like reintroduction that makes turning preservation into conservation something that might never, if not extremely rarely, happen. So I'm more of a realist. I've like at baseline, I have been and I've always been an optimist. I'm a 7 on the Enneagram, which is the same personality that Steve Irwin was. I want to tell people about these animals I love and why they should love them and why they're so cool. And I was just realizing this actually last night while I was watching Steve Irwin reruns. But animals and turtles have taught me to just be a realist, and I get a little bit pessimistic and cynical about the world because it's a really rough situation and it's an uphill climb. So that's why when Michael, as you were introducing me, you're talking about how you kind of see me everywhere. I made a decision a few years ago, like, I'm just going to put stuff out there to start the conversation. And if I can connect with some people like we're doing right now, then that's the best possible thing that we could be doing for these animals. It's just connecting and sharing, you know, the good that they could bring and how important they are, and the fact that people shouldn't overlook them.
I think that hits on an interesting point in terms of preservation work too. When you've got like the ethics behind this, I think to a certain extent, because there's certainly a difference in terms of kind of holistic, with the amount of divergence genetically that makes a species tends to be pretty extensive and kind of varies. But when you're looking at it, there's certainly more genetic diversity than just a species split. And so I think that if there is the luxury of being able to preserve kind of smaller scale population level differences in terms of genetic, that is also kind of mirrored in phenotype, or what an organism looks like generally. I think that that's something that should totally be considered. And I think with like stud books and such, you see that kind of thing, kind of preserving specific haplotypes and keeping things kind of locality based. But for other species, I think ethically you can justify kind of taking whatever's available. And a lot of times it is just kind of one closely related group, which is not necessarily a good thing. and you kind of want to play around with this sometimes to try to increase sort of that diversity in the gene pool. But to a certain extent, sometimes you kind of have to work with breeding a variety of different things that maybe goes against sort of morphotypes or population substructuring, I guess. But in terms of the Geomida, how many? So is it just sort of the mainland variety and then the Hainan variety, or are there a few more mainland varieties? I seem to recall in the book you mentioned 3, but I could be mistaken.
Yeah, there's more, and that's the great thing about the work that Daniel's doing, is that it's pretty extensive, and some of them, to your point, some of them are not as easily distinguishable using the phenotype, as they don't look a lot different than one another. So the Hainan ones are easy. The North Guangdong ones are really easy because they're massive, like up to 350 grams, which is like me compared to a normal person. I'm 350 pounds. So there's definitely some variation with some of those localities, but there are others that where it's not, and it's been very interesting and exciting to be able to actually do this, because why wouldn't you breed a Spangler eye? They're rare, they're awesome. There needs to be more of them in the world. They're continuing to decline, but people are starting to have some success, which is great. But again, how useful is that from a conservation standpoint? I mean, I guess hopefully it reduces the risk for them to need to be smuggled. Poached and smuggled is the best part from a conservation standpoint. Like, well, we don't need to send them to the U.S. anymore because it's not worth getting caught. Those other couple people got arrested, and they're producing a lot more now. And now, the price dropped. But from, at this point, the price is going higher because everybody wants it.
Yeah, I think it's sorry, Mike, I'll let you speak later. It's easy, and I've been guilty of this thinking in the past too. It's easy to think that, turtles are wild, they should stay in the wild, conservation over preservation. But it is also useful to think that this is it could be a very fine line between preservation and conservation. Preservation, you can learn more about, their incubation requirements, and, that could help you restore any, species back into the wild. And sorry to bring something that's outside of turtles, but right now the Amphibian Foundation, they just figured out how to breed flatwood salamanders, and that's these revelations, like how to breed them properly, what type of conditions do they thrive in, that could really help conservation in a way. So that's an important thing to discuss. And Michael, what are you going to say?
Well, I mean, that was a much better point than whenever I was going to bring up. That's actually a really good distinction, I think, in terms of, like, we learn so much through that. That definitely hits home, because you learn so much through the captive and ex situ situations that can be applied in situ. That honestly, I think it's it progresses the field more rapidly when you have private keepers working with scientists. And, as someone that's more, I would say, I don't know, I just like turtles. I don't really care what you classify yourself as in terms of, like, what part of turtles. I just like them in general. But there is kind of, and not to say that there isn't kind of a stereotype for captive keepers and everything, but in the science field, there's kind of a lot of times scientists sort of look down on people that aren't scientific or whatnot, and I think that's just so silly, because a lot of times scientists and people like that actually miss out on fundamentals of science, as observation and caring about that's the organism, and that's what matters. It's not really the ego. I think that gets in the way a lot. But yeah, regardless, that's interesting. I was just going to ask, has Daniel's an awesome guy. He was at the TSA meeting and gave multiple talks, and we've communicated a bit, but has he actually sequenced some of your animals to compare? I mean, that
Yeah, he has, and it's been incredible to see where they kind of stack up and how everything works. It's just mitochondrial, so I think there's going to be some that get kind of caught up in that, like, well, we still don't truly know where they fit in. If we don't know whether or not something's wild caught, luckily with Fangrai, you can tell like 95% of the time. But sometimes they, like, wild caught ones, look a little weird and have some characteristics like marginal scute flaring towards the back end that really happens usually in captivity, but sometimes you see it with wild ones. If you don't know their history, that could be a little bit confusing. But I wanted to touch on one other point that you said, Michael. The scientists and biologists, researchers who don't really value the what's coming from the private sector, and it happens a lot with the institutions as well. The AZA, they're really locking down now and going to be extremely significantly limiting the participation of private sector folks in stud books and species survival programs. You need a letter from the top person at a zoo, and you need someone from the zoo to come and visit your facility to give the go-ahead. It sounds good until you realize that, like, nobody wants to come and visit. Nobody wants to write the letter. So I'm struggling with that a little bit right now myself. It's a real frustrating thing. But I think my literary hero was Dave Lee. And Dave worked, he was a biologist, field biologist, but also somebody who bred animals as well. Sorry, my dogs are barking. I'm going to talk through it. But he was incredible. He also started like the Asian Turtle Consortium and had a bunch of information out there. He did amazing writing and was just incredible. And he's someone who was not scared to push private folks to being better. And there's so much of I get so much pushback, and I don't care. I'm going to keep pushing. The scientists, the biologists that you mentioned that aren't really listening to that side and aren't interested in that side, it's for a reason. It's because we, and I say we, it's not me, it's not you guys, it's not anyone in particular. I don't mean to generalize, but statistically, the majority of us really make ourselves look bad all the time. We're making it very clear that we're in it for the money. If you look, like, if the classified ads are the most, and I think they are, and YouTube and things like that are the most visual account of who we are, and then you're somebody from the outside who's making laws or deciding whether or not I want to take a chance to partner with this private person or whatever, chances are you've seen all that stuff and you've probably been burned multiple times in the past. And, you know, people change their ideas about what they're going to do more than I change my underwear. Like, okay, I'm going to do spider tortoises. This is it, man. I'm in it for the long haul. And then 3 months later, they're selling the spider tortoises that they told you how much they were excited about because they're, like, not exciting enough. Like, that's not the type of, you know, champion that we need in the corner of these animals. And so many times it's proven that that's not who the private person is. And I don't mean that like towards any person in particular. It's just my challenge, as Dave Lee would have done to us years ago, and how I felt reading his stuff. Like, it challenged me to be a better keeper and a better champion and, like, steward for these animals, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, and the other
Definitely.
thing too is,
I mean, just
go ahead. We're working
just
on a
going to
little
cut
bit
in
of a
real
delay,
quick and
so.
to kind of to go off of what Anthony was saying. Like, I've kept turtles since I was little, but I got like my terrapins back when I was in middle school, and throughout the years that I've kept turtles, I found like the most enjoyment and like the most when you really feel like, you know, you're getting something out of it is when your animals are doing well. So I think there's even something to be said about like trying to be better. It's not just for the image, but I mean, even just like the sense of satisfaction and like joy you get from the hobby. I think that there's something like in it, you know, for everyone, regardless of like how private or public you are.
Yeah, I agree with that. Last time I was at Maurice's house, I was like, I mean, I was just impressed with everything he had there, and the species he had are of course really mind blowing. But I would like to get more into that eventually, but currently I'm just focusing more on school and things because it's a lot of time and effort when you have that many turtles. And I already have I think I have 10 or 12. I don't remember the specific number off the top of my head, but it's already a decent amount to work with. And it's I don't need any more for a while. I'm just going to get through school, get my career and all that stuff set up. And once I have all that stable, then I would like to really go into it and start really getting into all of it.
I do think that there is a distinction too between conservationist and people that are in it for the commercial value or just the self-interest. And like Jason said, self-interest sort of varies, and obviously we're all sort of, I think, motivated by what we want. But I think that there's a difference mainly between conservationists and people that are doing this for, I think, commercial purposes, and that the commercial aspect tends to give sort of, I think, the hobby a bad name, just because a lot of people associate, oh, you keep turtles, you must sell them, or you must not really understand them and just kind of mass produce. And I think that that's so far from the truth in terms of when you look at essentially the entire TurtleRoom. These are all incredible people. I mean, when you say, I think a lot of people are amazed to hear that. I mean, you'd go through the process of actually sequencing your animals to understand small scale variations that a lot of that is for most people they wouldn't even think twice about. And I think that you're certainly a someone that is sort of, I think, a great sort of model, I guess, for the conservationist side of turtle and tortoise preservation. And there's so many other people that do it, but a lot of times they go unnoticed because a lot of the publicity comes from the groups like PETA and such that target the commercial aspect. And I think PETA targets all of that, and their ground is not conservation, it's ethics. And I think ethics is completely subjective, and you can't know what an animal is thinking or feeling, and so it's sort of a moot point. And PETA's just, a lot of people don't realize this, but their shelters for dogs and cats are almost 100% kill rates because they justify the animals better off dead. And even there was a lab that had two dogs. The person it was near where I live. I've been there a few times, and I guess a long time ago they had two dogs on site that somebody working in the lab just happened to own, and they had them in a large yard. And PETA had this idea that they were experimenting on them, when in reality the lab technician just owned them and brought them so they had more space to run around. And two people that were, I guess, spokespeople for or part of the PETA came over, and in the course of the night they burned both of the dogs. And just, I think that story sticks out in my mind in terms of what they stand for, is just sort of this crazy idea that animals are better off dead than kind of protected by us. And in certain situations, there are certain people that I think do need to be kind of held accountable for their actions, but there's a lot of people that they're not doing this because they want money, and they're not mean people. They really understand more than most people, honestly. So I think it like that invisible arc, sort of, and the people carrying the arc are a lot of times in the shadows in terms of the major publicity. So it's great work.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's the bad apples that get most of the publicity.
That's always the case.
Yeah. Especially with captive keepers. Anthony, when people hear you have 200 turtles, the last person you want to be associated is like Jay's reptile zoo, or those that you cannot justify conservation with those crazy commercial values that those people pump out now. Is it really just a sad scene that we're seeing all these bad people being pushed to publicity while good people like you just have to live in the shadows.
But with that said,
I appreciate
think
that a lot. Thank you.
there's a lot of people I think that that kind of do get the message across, but it's not going to be as sort of as I guess universal. There's a certain group that listens, and then there's the more that are kind of want that kind of instant gratification or instant kind of dopamine surge. Oh, so and so, all these people are bad. Someone just got busted with 50,000 turtles that they were exporting illegally. I mean, that's just not how. That's not what this is. This is it is science. I mean, it's observation. It's the pure form of science. It's no different than anything else, I think. I am curious, and I know that this is a genus that's fascinating to me, and just I guess the whole family, not just this particular genus, but the Maoramis, Asian pond turtles. I just think they're so interesting because they're similar in some sense to Western pond turtles, sort of in things they're related to, but also just kind of in habitat and in a lot of respects. And I'm just curious, like, what has your experience been with? You work with a lot of different Maoramis, I think, and what's your experience with those? I think that not a lot of people work with them, so.
You know, they're such an interesting genus. I've never seen like a group of animals, or can imagine a group of animals that simultaneously loved and hated each other so much. They will breed with each other across. I mean, they'll hybridize with anything. They'll, like, I have to make sure I don't leave my Maoramis around my dogs, because we might have some weird turtle dog hybrid. Like, they just love everything and try to mate it. And then on top, but then beyond that, they want to kill each other all the time. They have very aggressive and very hateful courtship and mating rituals that just rip each other apart. One of the interesting things is, my wife always says that I say everything is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. There's some animal project we're going to take on, or a trip that we're going to take to observe animals somewhere or something, and it's always a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. She tells me every time. No. So I was asked to go to, and I've told this story on the podcast before, and Totally Devoted, but I'll tell you guys briefly. I was supposed to, because it leads into the answer to the question. I was supposed to go to Shanghai to a turtle conference to speak, and it was a very interesting conference. It was in 2019, and she's like, "Oh, it's a once in a lifetime opportunity, blah blah blah, everything is." And I didn't go, all expense paid, didn't go. And I sent my friend, and he did a talk on box turtles, North American box turtles, which is interesting morally as well, because I helped him. We created the presentation together, and he went there. That's a very big, exciting group of animals over there right now. And they're going in there one way or another. So I think morally it makes sense to send him and to do the presentation. Number one, because then he gets to go and see Shanghai and see this conference, but then also because maybe this will help increase the percentage of animals that actually survive that are making it over there. And not that necessarily helps conservation, as we've already talked about, but maybe preservation anyway, to some extent. I don't know. Now I'm just talking out of my butt. But when he was there, he also was able to check out some of the turtle farms, and species like Reeves turtles are being produced. There's 10 million Reeves turtles being produced in China every year. Maoramis mutica, the yellow pond turtle, is a turtle that's being produced in huge numbers. And I think in terms of the most ferocious Maorami species that just wants to rip everything apart, I would think mutica is probably towards the top of the list, that yellow pond turtle. And what they do there is they basically just throw 1,000 of them into this huge pond together, and then there's not as much really significant injury inflicted. I think because there's so much going on with so many turtles that the aggression of those few aggressive turtles gets evenly distributed throughout the group, and then they don't end up picking on specific animals. So I think that's a really interesting thing with that too. But I have Meremes hybrids here. I have pure Meremes. I have a group of Japanese Reeves turtle, which is an interesting one because Reeves turtles were brought to Japan and introduced, and you get these huge black Reeves turtles that are so interesting, and that nobody really has. And it's not something that needs to be preserved, but it's just something that I think turtle nerds are really interested in, to have these really unique Reeves turtles that are part of a locality now, even though they were introduced I don't know, between 400 and 1,000 years ago. Anyway, Meremes.
And yeah, I mean, that certainly summarizes it. It's just such a diverse and interesting group. Like you said, the turtle farms are, that's one of those things that is just incredible to see, kind of the mass production that occurs there. One of the memories that sticks out in my mind was at one of the TSA in 2017 in Charleston. Dick Vogt was the last speaker, and he was actually talking about turtles in China. And for the last 5 minutes of his presentation, the entire place was just laughing out loud. He was just listing off the anecdotal reports of how many of each species China is producing. And, I mean, they were some pretty ungodly numbers. I think he said something like 68 or 350 Rapidus somehow. This was it could have been some sort of joke, but he was like, that just gives you an example of, obviously the numbers are going to be skewed, and these are all anecdotal reports, but it is ridiculous when you see sort of the quantities. And then as a group too, as someone who's interested in sort of genetics and that aspect of things, they're so interesting. Like you said, they just breed like crazy and seem to just kind of destroy all lines of kind of what you would expect in terms of where they can hybridize. A lot of people, I think, they know that they hybridize, but maybe don't know there was sort of a, I guess, paradigm behind this. Jim Parham, who I know decently, who works nearby where I live, he actually did a lot of those. I guess this is just for listeners. A lot of the Meremes hybrids, I think there were at least 12 that were described as full species, based on a lot of captive animals between the 80s and 90s. At this point in time, a lot of descriptions of species were based on morphology, what they look like, and you can't really blame people for doing the best that they can. But Jim Parham in the early 2000s came through and used some of the first kind of sequencing analyses and determined that there was a large group of mock turtles and that there were all these hybrids, and then that kind of opened up this whole idea that, oh, these are all just coming out of the farms. And a lot of people took locality data from the exporters, and that kind of thing is pretty I would definitely not. Certainly, I think if there's going to be a weak point of an argument, that's where it lies, is in not necessarily distinguish they used before there was really access to genetic data, but just to trust someone that was just trying to sell you the animal. I'm not sure, but regardless, it's such an interesting group, and I mean, have you produced? So you've got every member I guess we don't even know necessarily what members Acadia and what's the Acadia and then Chinemes, I guess, are kind of debatable. But have you produced? Are you own every one of those, or have representatives from every Meremes? Oh, I think you're muted.
Yep, sorry. I pressed mute and thought it didn't mute, and then it did. So here I am. Okay. I don't have a lot of the Meremes now, and not to say I work with them and moved on from. There's certain species I've never kept. Leprosa, caspica, the golden thread sinensis. There's quite a few that I never have, and I think it's more of like an understanding, like, okay, pump the brakes. These turtles hate each other, and I think creating an enclosure that works well for them is not something that's really easy to do. So I don't have a lot of the Meremies, but I do keep several, and I actually have several hybrids that like Meremies iversoni and others that were the actual animals used to write those papers in the 90s to describe them as species. So I actually have those specific animals, which is really cool. And those, obviously not a preservation project, but just something that I think is really interesting from like being a student of the game perspective, if that makes any sense. Like I really am interested in that history of kind of how some of those species came to be. And I don't have a lot of success breeding them. I have produced Kwangtung river turtles, redneck pond turtles, whatever common name you want to choose for them, Meremies, Nigricans. I have produced them, and I've produced a couple of types of Reeves turtle. But beyond that, I basically have some hybrids, and that's it. So not really that many. I have a lot more different Cora Asian box turtle taxa than I do Meremies at this point, but I'm very much married to a couple of those projects, including the Japanese Reeves turtles, which I just love to death. I also have a large group of Anamensis as well, the Vietnamese pond turtle, and the largest one too that's been recorded. It's funny, the paper says the largest one ever is 285 millimeters, the largest Vietnamese pond turtle. And then the credit for that is given to McCord and Iverson. But then when I talked to Bill, he's like, no, that one that you have is the largest Anamensis I've ever seen. But she's 245 millimeters. So something interesting there. I don't know if like it was taken over the curve of the shell. Generally, that's not normally how that goes. But anyway, I geek out over all this stuff, as you can tell. I'll be quiet now.
Same thing.
We're the same way. That's pretty crazy, and I think that's a good. Even the red-cheeked or red-necked pond turtles is a great example of a species where they're, I would say, maybe more in captivity. And there are certain variants like the, I guess to quote Peter Proschak, the dumbhead, the megacephalic ones. There's very few in captivity, but like the normal kind of variety, maybe more in captivity than in the wild. I guess that's a hard thing to say for certain, but
the Megacephaly is one of my favorite aspects of the.
I think you can with them. I think you can definitely say with them.
It's just well, I'm not cutting anybody off, am I? All right. Yeah, I was just gonna say the Megacephaly and like the Reeves eye and Nigricans, and you see in a few of them it's actually pretty crazy. It's very similar to like the Megacephalic Graptomes and Sternopterus over here, but I mean, just from my understanding of Megacephaly, it's a lot of it is just environmentally induced. It's their diet, and it probably varies depending on the species, but I mean, you can see it even with like common musk turtles. Like you can find some in an area that's packed with Asian clams, and they all have really large, like expanded heads. And then you find them in like a urban pond, and they all have really narrow, small heads. And the only difference is what they're eating. So that's pretty much what influences it. But it's still one of my favorite things. I love that unusual.
I have a group. I have a group of what would have been Kainemes. People pronounce Chinemes, but it's supposed to be, CH makes a K sound in Latin, right? So basically the Reeves that were supposed to be Megalocephala, right? So I have a group, but they're captive raised, and they don't have, they don't display the large heads that are supposed to be, the determining factor for those,
The head that we
because
see
they're raised in captivity.
I think it's completely environmental because they see it all over the place in different places, and there's no correlation to location. It all has to do with what they're eating, and that might even influence their body size and everything. Michael and I saw this on Instagram not long ago. There was this giant Reeves eye. It was like 11.2 inches or something, and it was really megacephalic too. So it looked almost like a barber's map turtle, just in disguise as a Reeves turtle. Like those are some of my favorites right there.
That thing was crazy. I saw the pictures too.
Oh, we were probably talking about the same animal.
The Megacephaly is interesting, and from I in college I'm thinking about hopefully trying to pursue kind of a field and looking at genetics and such, at least kind of incorporating that. And I think that you see kind of evolution of genetics, kind of there was this modern synthesis of information that kind of created these logical steps from sort of nucleotide to gene to protein to kind of phenotype. And now the next kind of step in this third sort of third synthesis is going to be, how does the environment affect structure and change actually genetic expression over time. And I think Megacephaly, honestly, in turtles could provide some of the clues to this, because it's such a fascinating thing to actually see skull morphology change so drastically. And you think about it, it's not. You could almost imagine the keratin of the beaks could actually kind of be molded to hard-shelled prey over time, but this is not. It's a complete restructuring of the cranial anatomy. So it's a really interesting, and I think that's something that in the future is going to be. Yeah, look at that. He's got.
All right, so
what are you holding up?
The big one is a loggerhead musk turtle, and the small one is a common musk turtle, and they have about the same body size. Kind of difficult. Let me reorient them from the top. And neither of them are particularly large. This loggerhead came from an environment where it was feeding on tons of snails, and so that's why it's got a just massively enlarged head. You can see how wide the plates are, and then this odoratus is just a typical odoratus, probably from a little sandy creek around here. So probably wasn't feeding on much things other than insects and detritus, and not really anything to stimulate that, that muscle growth.
One thing I find so interesting about Maramis too is, and this is something I kind of didn't think about, and this is why I think that they're similar to Emmys, sort of the European pond turtles and southwestern pond turtles. That it's so interesting to me that they're separated by 7,000 miles, and it's pretty fascinating, but. It's sort of a similar situation with Maramis. We've got 3 different species that are in the European area, and then you've got, I guess the number's debatable, maybe 4 to 5 in Asia. And they're separated by this large swath of land, and it's compared to the Emmy species, you're looking at two species separated by a larger distance, but Maramis it's sort of a similar situation with more species. And I think the consensus on that is now that there were multiple sort of radiations over time, and the Spanish pond turtles, which we talked about with Simone, are kind of like they were the first ones to colonize Europe, and then kind of over time they kept kind of radiating out to what they are now. It's just like that aspect in terms of their evolutionary history is fascinating to me too. It just adds to that kind of dynamic sort of flexibility and all other aspects. It's just such an interesting group when you dive into it. And
I'd be interested to see what the relationships actually are between the different Maramis species, particularly as it relates to those outdated genera that some of them used to fit within. Anemones is another one, which was basically a monotypic genus that held Anamensis, the Vietnamese pond turtle. And then we mentioned Chinemes or Kinemes. So there's it would be interesting to see kind of how all those how those continue to stay separated or like in the future. I think Emmys to actin Emmys, like people have a hard time even telling them apart. I'm raising young ones of each right now, and like there's so many similarities. I can't speak to the genetics as much in terms of Meremies, but I just feel like they're not. Some of those outliers are not quite as closely related. Who knows? I guess maybe I'm a splitter.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's certainly diverse. Like Maorami is just more species. You have a lot more kind of extremes in terms of diversity. I think, and that does appear to be the case. Like the Chinemis, the red cheeks and Chinese, the Reeves turtles kind of group, and then there's a little more divergence to the Japanese pond turtles, and then a little bit more to the European species. But like you said, Emmy, I actually actin Emmys is sort of maybe marginally more informative, but I think they should both calling pond turtles and European and Western pond turtles Emmys is not something it's wrong. So they're really close.
I agree. Yeah.
But yeah, no, I mean it's a fascinating group, and so conservation wise and preservation wise very important. I think we could talk forever. I didn't even get to, like, I've got Asian box turtle questions. I've got all that, but I don't want to keep everyone I don't want to keep you for that long. And I know everyone's kind of I've got some stuff I've got to do later, but I
think I'm good.
You can have me join you anytime.
Oh, I thought we lost you. Okay. Well, before we go, if it works, we play a little game at the end.
Yeah.
I don't know if anyone's crunched for time. Let me know. We're working on a delay here, so it's a little.
I just got to work at 1, so like as long as we can get done in enough time for me to get some food in the system before I go work, like we should be good.
Everyone else is good.
Yeah, I'm good. Yeah.
Let's do it.
All right, so I can. Well, who wants? You want? I can explain the rules, or who? Does anyone want to do the honors?
I think you could do it, Michael, if you want.
All right, I'll do it. So we play a little game at the end here, and Anthony, you're welcome to participate or just watch the madness. And in the spirit of the podcast, we do a little turtle trivia. So I'm going to pull up a random name generator, and we put all 5 of us or 4 of us, if you want to opt out and just watch. We'll put us in the name generator, and we pick the first person that gets picked. They get to come up with 5 questions in the span of 2 minutes related to turtles. I mean, it has to be a turtle-related question. And then we spin it again, and we pick someone who has to answer those 5 questions. And if the guest decides to participate, then and you get picked to answer or whatever, then it's just cloud if you get it right or whatever. But if one of us gets picked and whatever, we have to make 3 of the 5 questions, and if we don't, we have to do something that at the other person's request the next episode. So I don't know if you want to participate, but I'm going to pull up the.
Of course I do.
Can I make him do something embarrassing?
Well, in 2 episodes, I don't think anyone's lost. So we've all kind of like joked about how hard we're going to go on each other. And I mean, I think we've had pretty good questions, but nobody's lost. So, okay. So I've still got this thing saved from the last one. So this was all last week. Okay, I'm just gonna do random order. I've got my mic sitting on my computer, so I'm kind of this is gonna be a little slow. My typing is faster, I promise. Let's do Jack. I guess I don't need to do caps. There's probably no. Okay, so here we go. I'm gonna share. Oh, you guys can't see, so let me just
So
share
nervous.
this really quick. I know.
As you should.
I think.
All right. Are you trying to figure out how to pull up a generator or something?
Yeah, sorry. I've got like 40 million windows open right now. I've got a presentation later on pond turtles, so it's gonna be fun. Can everyone see this?
Yep.
Sweet.
Okay.
I can't. Oh, I see it. It's up.
All right, here we go. Okay, this is gonna be the first, and well, I'm gonna leave this as a surprise for some people might know, but while we're doing the guessing, we'll have some sound effects. So, okay, first person. This is the person who gets to pick the questions. Oh, okay.
I can't see it. Who was it?
Yours truly.
This is not good news for any of us.
Well, okay, yeah.
Congratulations.
Trust me, we're not gonna. Okay. This is the person that's getting questioned. Uh-oh. Oh.
Who'd you get?
I almost got you, so it would have been the reverse of last round, but Mr. Ken.
You almost got me. You probably murked me. I didn't go too crazy with you last time, but.
Well, no. Okay, so it's me versus Ken. So I guess everyone else is. And I could have come prepared with Jeopardy music, but instead I'm gonna be busy. I guess someone's gonna have to. I was gonna do the sound effects, but now I gotta come up with questions. So if someone wants to put on the Jeopardy music or something. All right, give me like 2 seconds to set up the timer. I'll play fair. I'm setting up my 2 minutes. All right, Ken, you got 2 minutes to sit there and wait for me to come up with questions.
I might be able to play the music on my phone if you want me to.
I think I can
that
cater
works.
this. I think I can. Well. Okay, yeah, I'll get going.
All right, you got it.
All right. Here we go. I'm on my 2 minutes. All right. 5 questions.
While we were waiting for Michael to murder me, Anthony, you also work for a VCA animal hospital, right? I find that pretty interesting. I don't think we discussed that yet. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, so I was a social worker for about a decade, and I kind of lucked into that just because I mentioned about my family history and stuff like that. I had some struggles growing up with and needing to mature early and be act like an adult in my family earlier than maybe some other people do, and kind of found myself after college like, okay, I have a degree, I know I don't want to be an artist, and I fell into that field and ended up being really successful in it until I needed a master's if I wanted to go forward, and I actually ended up losing my job, and I'm like, there's no way, I don't want to do this anymore. Maybe I can get a job in the animal field that I love so much. And put some resumes out there, and I was lucky enough to be able to. And then once I was a referral manager, so my job was to be the face of this large 24-hour animal hospital, which was really cool because I really am a people person. I want to get out there and meet people and talk to them about what I'm passionate about. And I knew 7 days in, I took a training, and I knew 2 things after that. I wanted to be a hospital manager, run my own hospital, and I wanted to be a trainer, like the training I had attended. So now, both 4 years in, both of those things are the case. I'm the hospital manager for a really large animal hospital. It's the type of place that you would bring your dog to get brain surgery, like a really big time referral hospital. And then I also do trainings. I just finished one up Thursday and Friday this week. I do 17-hour trainings over 2 days. And it's a really wonderful thing to be able to work in that field. And it's one of the things we're trying to do in the veterinary space is to reach out to younger people, because I think a lot of people, and you guys are all smart. I mean, you guys are so far and away past where I was at your age. I did not grow up knowing that was a possible career. I thought there were veterinarians and that was it. And I knew I wasn't going to be a doctor. Like, it's not even something that I thought about. So to work in this field now, I want to kind of change that for people so that we can get people from different areas too. I mean, right now, basically all there is, 95% of people in veterinary medicine are Caucasian, like 80 to 85% are women. There's just not a lot of diversity. And I think that we could grow a lot more if we were getting into, some more urban areas and continuing to grow the diversity in veterinary medicine. And there's a shortage of technicians, shortage of doctors. So we're also working on all of that too. But I'm writing a book, right? I'm writing 2 books right now. One on my wife and I with our turtle endeavors, kind of like a turtly devoted type theme. We're writing together about our relationship and how ridiculous it is to be married to somebody like me. And then I'm writing another one on kind of my social worker's perspective on the veterinary field, because it's crazy. Like, there's a lot of depression. There's a lot of people that are burnt out and overworked. So it's something I'm really passionate about.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's cool. When your book ever comes out, we'll be sure to tell our listeners about it. Unfortunately, right now, Michael's time is up, so we're gonna see that.
We're gonna call this one the death of Ken.
I'm not a turtle specialist, by the way.
Killed Kenny.
Get that out there.
Ken's dead.
He's dead.
I actually drove by the VCA headquarters in LA. Well, whenever I was, like, last month, and when I was going up to Turtle Conservancy, just by chance. So, just a random tidbit.
I hope I'll be there soon so that I can visit you while I'm there.
I was just at Turtle Conservancy a couple months ago with Michael. That was fun.
Well, and you were there at about the worst time. I had somebody second to worst time. December's the worst. But yeah, no, I mean, just let me know. Any of you guys are down here. We're going to look for the 2 turtles that we can, the 2 native turtles. We can probably find like 25% of global diversity if we were to look in some of the ponds. Okay, so get ready, Ken. No, this is not going to be, it's not going to be terrible. I think this is doable. And there's one question that is catered to you specifically at the end. So
I hope I can answer it.
Yeah. Okay. And you'll be able to, I think you'll do this. Okay. So the first question is what is the most frequently cited number of turtle species in Florida?
Let's think. How about 14?
No, multiply by 2 and then add 1. I've seen 29 the most.
Okay. A little bit off.
I mean, is there a consensus on that? I just want to fact check myself.
I
wonder if like iNaturalist has some sort of like, I guess,
I wouldn't
reporting
trust
on
that,
like
'cause
what you see.
And then you get some, but there are non-natives, and it still varies a bit. But I think 29 sounds about right. I don't know I don't think I would have even guessed that off the top of my head. I probably would have said like 31 or 26 or something.
I'm not asking you.
I was thinking high 20s.
Okay. So, I think that high 20s would have been acceptable, but 14, not going to cut that. Okay, so the next one, this should be an easier one. This one you'll get, I think. What is a section of the turtle shell called? Like a piece of keratinous layer of the shell. I'm probably way over. You'll know.
Like, are you talking about like a scute or?
Yeah. There you go. You got it.
Yeah.
Okay. So. Okay, this one. Okay, so what is the? There are 2 acceptable answers for this, but you're only realistically going to get one. What is the genus name? The most recent genus name of the bog turtle? He's like mastered the art of typing with his elbows.
Yeah, just typing on my elbows right now.
Yeah, he's just like look up on his phone.
It's does it start with an E? No, I don't know this one.
Okay, I would have accepted either Glyptomes or Calames, but Glyptomes. So
You got to get these next two right in order to win. So the pressure's on, Ken.
Okay, this might have been a little bit mean.
God damn it.
Oh man, I don't know. I'm trying. Okay, I'll give you the last one I was going to give you first because I feel bad now. So what is unique in general about the evolution of turtles?
Oh, I mean, they have very slow evolutionary rates in their mitochondrial compared to. Yeah.
That was way more detail than I was looking for. You just need to say slow. You got it. Okay. And then I thought you were gonna get the bog turtle one, man.
No.
You gotta do me like that, Ken. Make you look like a okay. I can't think of another question to ask you in this.
He's got 2 right and 2 wrong, so you better make the question a good one.
Okay, okay. Here we go. This was my original question for sure. What is the hypothesis behind why some turtles have a transorbital bar? Like, what does that help with in the eye?
Oh, okay. Well, I know one of them. It could be polarization sensitivity.
There you go. You got it. Yep.
You just explain it to our listeners.
Oh man, that's 3.
What do you
okay, he's getting okay. Yeah, you got it because you're gonna explain. Go
just
ahead.
explain to our listeners what that means. When you go fishing, you'll notice that it could be very hard to see fish in the water. So you wear polarizing sunglasses, and that it kind of aligns the sun's rays in ways that your eyes can perceive the shapes in the water easier. So it has also been suggested that these transorbital bars are basically like vertical bars in the turtle's eyes. They could aid in doing pretty much the same thing that your sunglasses do. Realigns the the rays of the sun so that they could help hunt in the water. There we go.
And also find water too.
Yeah,
They it's like one of the biggest mysteries is you can release sliders in areas where they can't, and spotted turtles and other sliders and mud and musk turtles. You can release them in areas where they don't have a vantage point to see water, and they can find it. So, and like the most direct path. Like obviously, if they just kind of went in a random direction, you'll probably find it at some point. But the most direct path, it's non-random orientation, so it's pretty interesting. But yeah, it's certainly okay. So you got 3 out of 5.
that was close.
Yeah, you clutched up. Wait, we got to do now. I gotta. Oh no, I'm doing it again. No, okay. All right, good job, Ken. Well, okay, I think that was I certainly went through a period of like waking up there, and now I'm awake. And I think that like that happened with maybe just me because I'm working on a different time zone here. But I mean that was I think that was an amazing episode in terms of like the depth of knowledge and just the range of topics. I think I speak for everyone here. We could literally talk to you for a full day, Anthony, probably longer. So it's just thank you so much for coming on. For us kind of starting this thing up, to have someone like you on here to talk to us and represent what it means to kind of be a really cool turtle person who's making an awesome impact. It's really an honor for all of us. So thank you so much for coming on and talking to us, and we'd love to have you back at some point too.
I appreciate you guys so much, what you're doing. I can't thank you enough for having me be a part of it and thinking of me. I am just blown away by all of you, your knowledge, your professionalism. You are just everything. You inspire me to continue to do what I do so that like I can continue to be seen as being in with people like you, if that makes any sense, right? Like we talk about the private sector and kind of the shortcomings of different animal people and stuff like that. Like you guys are it. It warms my heart to know that you exist. I want you to know that you have a listener forever to this. As long as you do it, I will be listening and sharing and telling other people that they should be doing the same. And if I can ever do anything for you, you want me to come back on, awesome. You have questions or you feel like you want to teach someone something, I'd be happy to learn from you too, because I've learned from you guys today and continue to. So thank you for being you. Don't ever change and just keep going. And I can tell you from experience, and I always felt this, that as long, I don't know where I was going to end up, but as long as I just kept doing something every day to improve my situation and to continue to like pursue what I was interested in, that I would be successful. And I feel if younger me could look at me now, I would be so proud and excited. But at the same time, there's still so much more to accomplish and stuff like that. So just keep doing the right thing. You guys are incredible.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. It's definitely like a pleasure to meet you, having watched the podcast like all these years. Yeah, thanks for taking the time out of what I'm sure is like a pretty busy schedule.
Thank you.
Yeah,
It was awesome. Thank you. It was great to talk to you. And do you live in like Connecticut? Is that what you said?
Yep. The Constitution State. Yeah. You have to come visit sometime. You're always welcome. If you guys ever find yourself in like the New York area, I'm like a little over an hour from the city. So just invite yourself if you're ever in the New York area, please. And I hope that I see you guys at a conference or something as well. But yeah, invite yourself whenever you're coming. Okay.
Connecticut's not
Me and
far from me, so I should probably make that at some point.
Jack and I were supposed to be down there like 10 days from now, but that didn't happen. So, but yeah, at some point we're certainly going to get up and see all that. But yeah, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure and an honor. See you.
Appreciate
it, buddy.